If you're a channel regular, you've probably heard me say something like don't trust anyone who makes political predictions, because they're probably selling you something. That is true. You've probably also heard me admit when I have been wrong about things a couple of times. Not that it happens too often. So how did I do with the votes on Brexit that happened yesterday? I kind of predicted that there wasn't a majority for any of the amendments that people wanted to put through, and I suggested that the one thing that there might be a majority for was ruling out no deal. Now, as it happened, things were even worse than I predicted, and I'm pretty pessimistic and cynical. And so really nothing passed except ordering the Prime Minister to go back to Europe and argue the backstop and so on again, and the EU rejected that within about 10 minutes, so that's not going to go anywhere. However, I wasn't entirely wrong. There was a vote that seems to have slipped by most of the media reports on this and the headlines this morning. There was a vote that stressed that Parliament did not back a no-deal scenario. It was just a completely non-binding vote by Dame something or other. So I wasn't entirely wrong, but things were worse than I thought they would be. So what happened and why? And you still shouldn't particularly listen to me or indeed anybody else, because all the rules of old are out the window, and I think only the very broadest descriptions of what is going on are going to have any explanatory power whatsoever. I think what we've seen is a kind of classic move in British politics where the Conservatives stay united mostly on grounds of party tribalism, and the other parties are a little bit freer and more open and less tribalistic, which means that the Conservatives tend to win out in these kind of situations. And it does seem that the ERG etc. have broadly fallen in line with the government, probably thinking that, well, if we can't force a no-deal scenario, we can get a deal and then we can shift the nature of that deal in the future. The Malthouse compromise is what everyone's talking about, where Remain and Leave factions within the Conservative Party have come together to try and hammer out something that they can agree on. To my eternal shame, Kit Malthouse is my local MP. So, yeah, at least I'll know where to go when the revolution comes. This comes back to a basic problem in British politics, is that it is very adversarial. One side or the other, very tribalistic, very party oriented, and the parties distort the underlying structure of British politics, which is supposed to be your MPs representing your issues and so on locally. In practice, they put party before country and before whatever seat they happen to be in. Very few issues come up where they're actually representative of the people in their constituency. They might, if something gets a high enough profile, or occasionally they'll step in to help in individual PR cases, which is all well and good, but in the standard kind of running of government, concern for local issues tends to go out the window, and people vote along party tribalistic lines as well, not based on which MP is the most local or most engaged locally or best represents the local area. This is all problems with first past the post representative area MPs. It just doesn't work, and it carries on up the chain into government, tribalism there in Parliament, and there's very little requirement for compromise, for making deals, for reaching across the aisle, coming to a consensus and so on. It's only relatively recently with the spate of hung parliaments where one of the main parties has had to make some kind of deal with another political force, whether it be the Liberal Democrats or the DUP in the case of the Conservatives. But this is unusual for British politics, which remains very adversarial most of the time, so they're not used to making compromises and deals. So what happens next? Don't listen to anybody, least of all me, I guess. But this has just kicked the can a couple of weeks down the road. The EU has already rejected any further negotiation without movement on the part of Theresa May. Theresa May can't move particularly far without pissing off the far-right elements in her own party yet again. The only way that she has to move is to shift closer to a customs union and single market, and the EU will then push very hard for the four freedoms and so on that are intimately tied up in those. So she really doesn't have much, if any, room to manoeuvre. All this has done has pushed us closer to doomsday. That's really about it. The resolution that passed, that Parliament is against a No Deal Brexit, is completely non-binding. It's just purely advisory, but that may have some influence later on as we get closer to that deadline. So for all people have been crowing about how this kept Brexit going and defeated the people trying to stop it, it hasn't really. It's just delayed the inevitable crunch time, which could go in any direction. But with military bases stockpiling, with medical suppliers stockpiling to the point where I'm having issues getting my medication, these impacts are already here. The pound's plummeted again. We are fucked. And nobody seems willing to grasp the nettle to do what's necessary, one way or the other, to resolve this whole terrible business. Zang. Postmortem Studios, role-playing games, and a lot more to die for. Post-mort.com